back to my channel. My name's Stacey, I am a mess in a dress, and today I am here with the 2022 A Mess in a Dress Reading Awards. So this isn't actually a thing, I've literally made this up like half an hour ago, but this is kind of my answer to the Goodreads Awards because I was having a little look down the list, particularly the romance category, and out of, were there 20 books on each list? I had read 4 of them. And I read over 300 books this year, so I was like, well, what was I reading? If these were the choices that were the most popular, best romance of the year, what have I been reading? So I decided I would have a look back over my reading tracker from the beginning of the year and look at all the books I'd read and pick out my top reads of 2022. And to make it just a little bit different and interesting, I've grouped them into categories like an award show. So there are 10 categories altogether. There could have been so many more. Like, I tried to keep them in quite broad categories, and for each award there are nominees who are the top reads in that section, and then the overall winner, which is a completely arbitrary me just deciding which of those books at this very moment I think was my favourite. It might change if you ask me tomorrow, who knows. But anyway, let's get started. I get the feeling this could be a long video and I really want to get this done as quickly as I can. The first category is Best Contemporary Romance Novel. So this was probably one of my hardest categories because it was so broad. Like, I didn't want to break it down into college romance, sports romance, small town romance. I was like, I can't go into all of those individual little subsections, so I've kept it really, really broad, which meant that there easily could have been 20 to 30 books that stood out for me this year as the best books of the year, but I've tried to keep it minimal. So for the nominees, we have Heartless by Elsie Silver. I think this is one of the most talked about books of this year. Everybody's raving about Elsie Silver this year. This is a single dad romance. It's kind of small town as well. It features an incredibly sassy heroine who we all love and great banter. It's the perfect blend of sweet and sexy, just like the first book in the series was, and who can forget that iconic opening meet cute where he picks something up that's falling out of her handbag and it happens to be a pair of her underwear. Clean underwear, but her underwear. It's embarrassing, it's sweet, she brushes it off, she doesn't care, she tells him to keep them, and the story starts, and honestly, it's just the kind of book that sticks with you. So next up we have Let It Snow by Beth Moran. This was a completely unexpected find for me. I hadn't heard anybody else speaking about this book. I think I found it in like a Kindle's deal thing for like 99p or something, I can't remember. And I was absolutely blown away. So there were so many tropes in this. It was a little bit enemies to lovers. There was a road trip, they got stranded in a mall, there was a snowstorm, there was only one bed. The hero fell first, there was long-term pining. It was just amazing. The hero just absolutely, I melted for him. I think his name was Henry Fairfax, and I apologise because we all know what I'm like with character names, but oh my god, I just died for him. He was so adorably cute, and this was just one of my breakout, came out of nowhere books of the year. I loved it. So next up we have Tattered Stars by Catherine Cowles, and I had seen this book talked about, in fact I'd seen this series talked about on various channels, and I had sort of like tucked it in the back of my head as maybe I'll read it, and then I think it came up as like an offer for a day, so I thought, right, I'm gonna get the first one and I'm gonna read it through, and wow, am I glad I did. Like, I loved the writing style, I loved the storyline. From what I remember, it is a heroine whose family has a bit of a traumatic past. Her dad actually committed a crime in her town and she had to leave, and there was all family drama, and the hero is the son of the family who were the victims of that crime, and so obviously there's tension between the two of them, and she goes back to the town to try and live there and take over her mum's house, but there's all this resistance and this animosity and people don't like her and they don't like her dad, and it was angsty in the best possible way, and I loved the tension between them, and I loved how also it wasn't just everybody hated her. It was like some people were like, well no, it wasn't her fault, she can't be blamed for her dad's crimes, and then eventually he comes around, and oh, I just loved it, and I really, really do need to read the rest of the series this year. It's like one of my top things on my to-do list, so loved it. So the next nominee is the Soulmate it's the Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren, and I don't know if I've read other books by Christina Lauren. I thought I had, but I don't remember them, and I definitely don't remember them being this good. Like, this one, I went into it thinking it's a TikTok, everybody loves it, but I don't know what to expect, and oh my goodness, I was just blown away. I was absolutely and utterly gripped. So basically we have a hero who has developed a dating app which uses genetics to figure out who your best match is based on your DNA, which is a quirky idea which I'm sure has absolutely no base in real science whatsoever, but I like the idea, so I'm going to let it slide. Our heroine is really like dismissive of it, and of course, for various reasons, doesn't like the hero. Obviously, because it's a romance novel, they take the test and they are matched like through the roof. And then we get this whole really interesting romance based on, you know, fate over choices and how much of your life is predestined, and what do you do if you find somebody who you're told is your ideal mate but you don't think they can be. And just, it was such a weirdly philosophical debate about relationships and how they can work and what we allow to determine how relationships work. It was so fascinating. Plus it was really sexy. Plus it was really cool. Plus I completely fell for the hero and just, oh, I just loved it. It would probably have been my winner if not for the ending, which I enjoyed, but I personally would have preferred it to be slightly different. I think if that had been different, this probably would have won, because it was one of those books that once I'd started it, I could not stop reading it until I finished. So Christina Lauren is going on my list of people I need to go through their backlist and read some of the books, because whoa, I love this one. And then my final nominee for this section, I told there were a few, is Falling Stars by Sarah Madison. Now this book, if you were a fan of Bridgerton, you were going to love this book. Like, seriously, it is a second chance romance, and it is based on a couple of actors. We have a young female up-and-coming actress and a sort of veteran actor who is maybe on his way out, and they have a small romantic interlude and then it all goes horribly wrong. And a few years later they meet again when they're both cast in an upcoming hit historical romance. I think it's a TV series, but it might be a film, I can't remember. But it's like a production, very, very like Bridgerton. So they are modern actors in a historical film, and oh, it's just so good. So it is pretty steamy. I don't remember the exact steam. I don't really track like how steamy a book is. I just know there is some steam in it, and there is one particular scene when they have their first intimate scene on set, which I'm sure every intimacy coordinator in the world is just freaking out about, because it's so, I imagine, against every single policy of every intimacy coordinator ever. But I loved it. It was so cool. It was just such a fun idea and I really enjoyed it, and I think it's part of a series and I do need to read the rest of the series this year. That is another thing I have to do. But my winner for this category of Best Contemporary Romance is 'Tis a Season for Revenge by... I didn't write down who wrote this. Is this Morgan Elizabeth? Yeah, of course, it was Morgan Elizabeth, because I'm obsessed with her this year. Full on obsessed. So this book is all over Bookstagram, BookTube, Book Talk at the moment. Like, everybody's talking about it, and for very, very good reason. This was one of the festive reads that I read purely based on recommendations from Christy Reads a Lot. I think Tiff talked about it. There were people, everybody was talking about it, and it was so good. So it begins with like a real nod to Legally Blonde. Our heroine is really excited because she's going out with her boyfriend to this big Christmas party, and she thinks that he's going to propose to her, and she's really excited because he's kind of kept her on the sidelines as if he's a little bit embarrassed about her up until this point. He's like this upcoming lawyer person, he's really important, and she's into pink, sparkly, glittery things. Is she an influencer or something? I can't remember. But anyway, she's not what he wants to present to his lawyer friends. And instead of proposing to her, he dumps her in the car, and she's gutted, and it's very Legally Blonde, like the opening. So she goes home, she's sat with her friend, she's having a crying sesh, they're doing all things that girls do when they're broken up with boyfriends, and she's scrolling through a dating app looking for like a rebound revenge, and scrolls into her boyfriend's boss, who is this uber like successful hot lawyer type, and she's like, that's it, I'm gonna sleep with his boss, that's my plan. And then the book starts, and this has got such great reviews because of the boss character, because he is just epic. And when he realizes that this heroine has like really low self-esteem, and she's been talked down by her boyfriend, she's been told she's not good enough, and told that she needs to change, and change the way she dresses, and change the way she looks, and maybe her tummy's too big, and maybe she's uncomfortable with the figure, all of this stuff, he's like, nah mate, I'm not having any of that. When you're with me, you are perfect and wonderful, and you don't hide yourself from me, and you don't try and change yourself for me, and just, he is just swoon worthy. The ending, I was a little bit like, I could have done with it being a little bit different. I sort of felt with the revenge plot, one, I would have liked her to just tell him that it was a revenge plot, because I think that would have been also quite a funny book if he was in on it and then fell in love with her, because he's like, he doesn't want a relationship at the beginning, so he's quite happy to have just a casual fling affair thing. And I think if she'd have actually said, look, I'm trying to get revenge on my boyfriend, that could have been quite an interesting plot as well, but that's not what happened. So the ending wasn't 100% perfect, but the book overall was fantastic enough that this wins this category for me, and it was definitely one of my favourite books of the year, so go and read it. I also, incidentally, don't think you have to read this at Christmas. It is a Christmassy book. Obviously, it's set around the Christmas season, but I totally think you could read this book at any time of the year and you'd be fine. So my next category for this awards ceremony is the best historical romance. And actually, looking back at my reading tracker for this year, I haven't read that many historical romances this year. I mean, I have, but not outstanding ones. Like, it's been a quieter year for historical, so we'll see what next year brings. So there actually aren't as many nominees as I thought we were going to have, so let's get started with the fantastic Lisa Kleypas with Hello Stranger. Now this may surprise you because I don't think this would be anybody's favourite book in this series. I wouldn't have thought it was my favourite book in the series. To be honest with you, I read this one, I read Chasing Cassandra, I read Devil in Disguise, and I read Devil's Daughter. So honestly, any of them could have appeared here. And if I went back and reread them, my answer may change as to which one I preferred, but this one stood out to me particularly when I was back thinking about which one I was going to pick. This one popped into my head because of one particular scene. So the heroine is a doctor. She's like the first female important doctor. She's been in other books. We've seen her. We know her. And the hero is he like a policeman? They get involved. They get romantic. It's Lisa Kleypas. It's wonderful. But there is a scene where he is injured and she has to operate on him. I don't like medical dramas. I don't like doctors. I don't normally read medical romance. That scene is one of my favourite scenes in any historical romance I have ever read. The stress and the pressure that she feels performing this operation that has never been done in conditions where it should not be done, in just on a person that she cares so much about, and the outcome of this is so important, knowing that the likelihood is she will fail and he will die, was just like, I could feel the tension. It came off the page, it made my heart race, it was so exciting, it was so satisfying, I just loved it. So that's why this one gets put over all the other ones, because that particular scene just affected me more than I remember any other scene affecting me. So yeah, Lisa Kleypas. Any of her series are great, any of her books are brilliant. What do you want me to do? The next nominee is this one, The Trouble with a Dare by Emma V. Leach. Trouble with a Dare is about Grace, and Grace is a young woman. She's not like a particularly adventurous, dramatic young woman. She's not stood out in the rest of the books, but she has got herself into a bit of trouble because she's been seduced by a cad, and she is now in the family way, and she doesn't know what she's going to do because obviously in that time period this was not an acceptable state of being. I don't remember the exact set of circumstances, but basically she ends up meeting Sterling Oak, who is this quiet gentleman farmer from down the way. I think he's been mentioned in other books, but we've not really had anything to do with him. He's not lordly, he's not known for being particularly like charismatic or anything. He's just this guy who keeps himself to himself. He finds out about Grace's problem and he offers to marry her, to look after her. And then it's just the cutest, sweetest romance. She is this woman who has been betrayed, she's been left alone, and she's scared and she's worried, and he just takes her into his sort of like family and just looks after her, and it is just beautiful. It was just lovely. It was so sweet. I loved it. I loved Sterling. I loved Grace. I loved the romance. I loved all of it. It was so cute. I always like a bit of a gruff hero who actually has a heart of gold. Like, he's a giant teddy bear, and I love that. So drumroll please, my winner for the best historical romance in this category is Never Fall for Your Fiancé by Virginia Heath. And yes, I am as surprised about this one as you are, because I had never really heard of this book. And I think I got it, no, I know I got it as an ARC on NetGalley. And I read it, and I enjoyed it. I remember reading it and thinking, well, this was surprisingly fun. And it was fast-paced, and there was banter, and there was comedy, and I enjoyed it. And I put it to one side, and I never thought of it again. And, more importantly, I didn't review it. Naughty. Naughty Stacey. So, about October, November time, I was trying to go through my NetGalley and tidy up and actually review some of the books that I'd very generously been given, because you know that's kind of the deal. And I reread Never Fall for Your Fiancé, and I had forgotten how much I enjoyed it. Like, I'm not even kidding. It was such an easy read. It was so fun-filled. So our hero, Hugh, has been trying to avoid his matchmaking mother by faking a fiance. And he's faked his fiance for like 2 years. She is called Minerva. She has had various illnesses, various family tragedies, and she doesn't exist. So when his mum says she's coming to visit, he panics and doesn't know how he's going to get out of this whole not being able to present the fiance that he's been telling her about for the past 2 years, until, just by complete coincidental chance, as happens only in romance novels, he bumps into a young lady in distress called Minerva. Serendipity strikes and he asks Minerva to pretend to be his fake fiance. She, along with her two sisters, go to his country estate to plan and prep and get ready for this whole visit from his mum, and literally chaos ensues. Like, this is a proper romantic comedy set in historical times. There are so many flipping antics. There's the best friend who's a bit of a rogue. There is the actress that they hire to play the girl's mother, who likes a bit of a drink and is often completely just wild in the story she'll spin, and occasionally forgets that she's meant to be acting, and we'll talk about her time on stage. There were just so many fantastic little romantic comedy moments, and I just really enjoyed it. And on second reading it, I enjoyed it just as much as I had the first time. So I kind of had to put this as my favourite, because after reading it twice and really enjoying it, I felt that's a really good indication of how good this book is. So yeah, so this was my favourite historical romance of the year. Any of the ones in this category really probably could have won, but I am a bit of a sucker for a fake relationship romance, and this one was really well done, so I did enjoy it. 5 stars. Thank you very much. And the next category is Best Fantasy Romance. Now, fantasy romance I find really hard, because I find the line between fantasy and paranormal blurs a lot. Like, how do you differentiate? What is your difference? For me, I tend to go paranormal is witches, werewolves, vampires, ghosts, that kind of thing, and fantasy is fae and magic and that kind of thing. It's loose, but that's how I categorise it in my head. I've read a lot more fantasy romance, I think, this year than I normally do. A lot of it has been very samey, and I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. Like, it wasn't bad samey, it was just they all had a very similar theme. It was always usually a heroine who meets a dark, twisted hero, prince, faking, possibly under a curse, bit of Beauty and the Beast. There's usually something that she's not meant to be doing or not meant to have done, like she's not meant to look at him, or she's not meant to know his name, or she's not meant to do, there's something, and she always by the end of the book does it. These books are often told in trilogies or duets, which are my least favourite kind of book, because just if you cannot fit it all into one book, I kind of don't want to know. But I've had quite a few that I've quite enjoyed after saying all of that. They're all quite samey, they're hard to differentiate, but I have enjoyed them all. These were my top favourite fantasy of this year. So first up we have Curse of Shadows and Thorns by L.J. Andrews. This was a trilogy, and this was kind of fun because the book as it starts and the book that it ended up being by the end of book 3 were quite different. It had been on a journey. Our heroine is a niece to the king, I want to say. God, I'm really testing my memory today. And she is going to be set up in an arranged marriage, and the hero, who is called Legion Grey, I believe. What a name. What a fantasy romance name. He is the person who is tasked with arranging the whole marriage, and of course they start to have a connection, and then midway through book 1, plot twist, the whole book changes because this big secret is revealed. There's a big dramatic like military coup from another angle that you weren't necessarily expecting, and everything changes. Like, the book as we know it changes. The characters suddenly aren't who we thought they were. The character motivations maybe aren't what we thought they are, and then we enter this big epic fantasy saga thing that goes on for the next 2 books. I really enjoyed it. I really liked the fact that the hero, his backstory is kind of a bit Viking-y, so it felt a little bit different to the normal fae, beautiful, tall, willowy men, long hair, all the rest of it. It was very sort of rough and ready Viking fighting. I really enjoyed that. There's magical elements, there's betrayal and intrigue. It was an enjoyable series. I raced through it. I read the 3 books back to back in like a couple of days. I really enjoyed the series. It was a lot of fun. So then another series that we read, which is actually not finished, which is probably the reason this hasn't won, is Bride of the Shadow King by Sylvia Mercedes. I've also read a couple of her other books now, other series, and I'll be honest, they're all a bit samey. Not a bad thing, not a criticism, just a comment. So Bride of the Shadow King, we have a heroine who is she disabled? Is she wounded in some way? Does she have a bad leg? I can't remember. I'm thinking yes. There is some reason why she is seen as being lesser goods in her family, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but that's what I'm leaning towards. And she is at court with her father and her sisters when the Shadow King arrives to pick a bride. He's going to pick her hot, beautiful, glamorous sister, because that's how this is going to work. But there is this instant connection between the hero and the heroine that's kind of forbidden, it's kind of not allowed. For reasons which I will not go into because I don't want to spoil anything, the heroine ends up having to take the place of the sister and go to the wedding in her place. In disguise, magical disguise, they do something to cover up her appearance and everything, and she has to go to this wedding and hope that they can fool him long enough to have the marriage go through for political reasons, blah 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 blah. I, so far, have read the first 2 books. Like I said, the third one has not yet been released. It's coming out next year. I'm really hoping that it ends the series in a satisfactory manner, because so far I have really enjoyed this. There's that fun where the betrayal is obviously discovered and the king's already annoyed, and does he execute her or does he keep her because he's already kind of in love with her? And there's all that sort of drama and tension and angst, which I really enjoy, especially in a fantasy romance, because I feel it really, really fits. The writing's very enjoyable. It's very easy to read. I find a lot of weighty prose and a waste of will put me off because I don't have the attention span for it. It's just a really satisfying, easy read, and I am very, very keen to find out how the series ends because I'm really hoping this is a 5-star series for me. And then another series that is not yet complete, but I really enjoyed the first one, is Wolf God by an author whose name I've forgotten, so I'm going to put it here. But basically, this is an arc that I've just got off of NetGalley, and it was just one of these whim. You know when you click something and you're like, yeah, I'll read that, I've not got a clue, but I'll read it. And it's so good. It was so good. Like, I didn't know what to expect because in the opening chapter I thought, have I missed like a book? Because I have no idea what's going on, and I've got this heroine who's fighting this battle with her friends against this godlike figure who is the baddie, and he's evil and we hate him, and yet he's the hero for the rest of the book. Like, what is happening? I'm confused. It becomes clear like as you get through the book, but basically our heroine is fighting this war against the wolf god because she believes he's sent to destroy the world and all of her people, blah 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 blah. She somehow, in a magical way that I can't remember right now, ends up in the wolf god's clutches, in his realm, in his palace, and he needs her to help break this curse and fix everything. And it turns out that we as a reader realise that maybe he's not the baddie that we think he is, and maybe there's more to it than this. And maybe this is all a massive misunderstanding and they just need to talk to each other. And of course they don't talk to each other because this is a romance, and why would they do that? Like, why would they communicate like normal people? They won't. But there's all this drama. She's trying to escape, she's trying to figure out how to take him down, he's trying to get her on side. It's beautiful. I really, really enjoyed book 1. I can't wait to read more in the new year. I'm just very excited for the next release. And so the winner for this category is, yet again, another non-completed series. I have had enough this year of reading stories that haven't yet been finished because I'm getting really sick of not knowing how the story ends. But this series is one that I'd seen quite a few times on BookTok, I think, but not really by anybody I knew. No one I knew had read it. And this is the Ruthless Villains series by Marion Blackwood. Both of our heroine and our hero are villains. They are dark mages, I think they're called. They're basically the baddies in the world. In the world in which they live, nobody has power, magical power themselves. If as a child you start displaying magical power, at a certain age of your life you perform this ceremony where you give your power over to the big group pot of magic, and that is distributed equally through everybody. So everybody has a little bit of magic, nobody has all of the magic. The dark mages are the people who went, sod that, this magic's mine, I'm keeping it, and off they go. And they live as kind of outlaws. They are on the fringes of society. Everyone's scared of them because they're all a bit evil. And there's only a few of them. There's like 6 or 7 of them, and they're all uber powerful. And they're all trying to kill each other, and they're all trying to destroy each other, and it's really, really freaking funny. For some reason, which I can't remember, go read it, you'll find out, they have to go on a quest together, and they get lumped together, and they've got to help each other to find this sorcerer who's off in this world, and off they go. You've got 2 baddies. They are constantly trying to outdo each other. They are constantly trying to betray each other. There's just constant underhanded dealings going on. Great banter between the 2 of them. It's very sort of great sexual chemistry between the 2 of them. I really, really enjoyed it. I have read book 1 and 2 now. I've got book 3 lined up on my Kindle ready to go. And I think there might even be a 4th one. So yeah, this is a really, really good series. I've really enjoyed it so far, and I really hope that continues because I just love it. And I love the dynamic of having both of them being completely not trustworthy. It's a really fun dynamic. So the next category I have is Best Paranormal Romance. And I don't think I've read that many paranormal romances this year, so this was quite a small category to pick from. But here we go. So first up we have The Lady and the Orc by Finlay Fenn. Everybody loves this series, right? Everybody loves... I feel this was like the start of the proper monster romance renaissance, when everyone started talking about these monster romances. And from this we went from orcs to dragons to snake monsters, which I will never read, to spider monsters, to you name it. It's anything goes nowadays. So the orc books were the first ones that I kind of heard people reading about and raving about, and I did really enjoy this one. It's a great sort of spin on Beauty and the Beast, and the orcs are definitely orcly, but they're still kind of hot in their rugged intensity. It was a lot of fun. There is a little bit too much talk of bodily fluids for me, I'm not gonna lie. Like, that's not really my jam. And I really don't think I should use jam in that sentence. You know what I mean. It's not quite what I'm after when I read a book, but I get it appeals to some people, and it is a trope that is used a lot in this book and in all subsequent books in the series, I believe, although I've only read 2 of them so far, I think. But it was a lot of fun. It was a very easy read. I liked the characterization, and yeah, I just enjoyed it, so well done. Next up I have Nova by Cara Clare, and this is one of my favourite series that I read in 2022. It's not quite finished yet. The final book is due to come out in January. This is a 6-part series, and honestly each individual book isn't that long, so they don't take long to read. But basically this is a very magic heavy environment where our heroine is from a non-magic community where magic is sort of outlawed. They have sort of like almost fascist groups where they will track down witches and do horrible things to them. And she escapes from an abusive boyfriend. There's quite a nasty scene at the beginning. If you are sensitive to sort of domestic abuse, be careful in the first chapter of that first book. It's intense. And she runs away and ends up in a very magic community where she meets a group of various magic users. This is a why choose poly romance between one heroine and 5 to 6 males, depending on your take on the book. And you get every kind of magic user you can imagine. So there is a kind of vampire, but not really a vampire. There's a bear shifter, there are fire mages, there are water mages, there are empaths. There's something for everybody. And it's just a really intense story where the heroine turns out to possibly be this prophesized female who's going to save the world from a big evil that's coming. And over the course of the series we see all that happen, and we also see her relationship with each of the men develop. And there's drama, and there's threat, and there's angst, and it's just an enjoyable series. I've really enjoyed it. It does not take a long time to read. It's not a hard read by any means. And so every month when the next book is released, I'm there like ready and waiting, and it will be no different in January. And the next book on this category is The Tyrant's Rejected Mate by Kate C. Wells. I've read some of Kate C. Wells' Mafia, I believe. Or was it Mafia? Or was it... No, Motorcycle. MC romance. I was kind of indifferent. I enjoyed it, but I didn't rave about it. This one took me by surprise. I don't even know why I read this book. I don't even know why it appeared on my Kindle, but I saw it and I was like, that sounds intriguing. It is a wolf shifter romance in a pack of wolves. They're all shifters, but the heroine is seen as a weaker, just a bit useless. She doesn't have a pack, she doesn't have a family, she has no real sort of use in the society, she's not respected. And the hero is the alpha, who is the boss, and he's like the big, everybody wants to be him and know him and sleep with him and all the rest of it. And she discovers that she is his mate in quite a public, embarrassing setting, and he rejects her because she is not good enough and she is not the kind of mate that he thought he would end up with. And so he tries to resist it, and because this is a fated mate scenario, and because they have this sort of like wolf primal heat kind of environment, fate doesn't really let him reject it, and it ends up having an impact on both of them. I really enjoyed this. I also have really enjoyed the subsequent 2 books in the series. I don't know why, this whole fated mates being rejected trope is really working for me at the moment. So I've read all of the books in the series and thoroughly enjoyed them. Again, they're not particularly long, difficult reads. They were pretty easy, they just rolled off the page. Everything's quite action-packed. There is a bit of action and drama. They are quite steamy. It sort of falls between like a shifter romance and, you know, like Omegaverse. All that's rolled up into one pretty little package. really enjoyed it. So my winner for best paranormal romance is actually two books, because there was no way I could pick between these two. There was just not a chance. And that is Always Practice Safe Hex and Resting Witch Face by Juliet Cross from the Stay a Spell series. I mean, seriously, what do I need to say? What do I need to say? I love this series. I love the sisters. I love the characters. I love the different paranormal feel. I'm a huge fan of Kresley Cole. I say it every time I talk about these books. I hate to constantly compare the two, but they're the only real sort of marker I have in terms of what I love in paranormal romance. And Stay a Spell is as good as Immortals After Dark, but it is also different to Immortals After Dark. The vibe is different, the mood, the tone. It's a little bit more lighthearted, it's a little bit more upbeat and fun. It doesn't feel quite as deep and weighted as the Immortals After Dark series do, and these two books, I mean, Always Practice Safe Hex features a Grimm, which was new for me. It was a paranormal sort of entity that I hadn't had a lot to deal with, and it was exciting and refreshing, and I really, really enjoyed it. And Resting Witch Face was the book that we'd all been waiting for flipping years, because it was the culmination of a couple that has been teased throughout the entire series. It was awesome. The next book is coming out this year. I can't remember what it's called right now, but I cannot wait. There was no contest. This is clearly the best paranormal romance that I'm reading at the moment, and I'm sure it will be again next year. So, really, really, really quickly, because this was a really not highly contested series, we have Best Mafia Romance. I've read a lot of Mafia romance this year, but I've not read a lot of good Mafia romance this year. Or I've read sort of like really indifferent, wow, you're really not doing anything new with this genre, are you? That kind of romance. There were two exceptions to that, and they are going to be mentioned now. So the first up is Savage Tracker by Maggie Cole, and I think this is called the Mafia Wars series, and I really enjoyed all of them to different degrees. Like, they were perfectly good Mafia romance, a good variety of heroes and heroines, a good variety of trope. Like the first one, I think Ruthless Stranger, is a really cool, they have a romantic interlude in a hotel room, hidden identities, and then they meet later, but he's involved in mafia, so he doesn't want to drag this heroine in. So that was a close contender. But Savage Tracker is my favourite from the series, and it features a heroine who has just escaped from a horrible marriage with a very abusive husband. So just be really careful again for sort of content on that one, because you do get a few descriptions of things that are quite unpleasant. Plus the husband comes back as a antagonist towards the end, and it's not nice. It's not nice. The hero is basically the guy who falls in love with her and wants to protect her and look after her. Each of the books has quite a BDSM-y feel. I find that always tends to go into Mafia, the sort of sub-dom relationships, and he wants to have a relationship with her, but she's obviously been abused before and she's been damaged, and she has quite negative feelings towards sex and relationships, and so she's very wary of him. And I loved it. I always love a little bit of healing through sex, like using it to help rebuild trust and bridges. That's always quite exciting and quite interesting to me. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this book. So the series is great, but this book was my standout. But the winner for this category isn't really a book, it is a whole series, and that is Brutal Birthright by Sophie Lark. So I had actually read book 1 and 2 from this series previously and had completely forgotten about them, like hadn't thought about them, and then I don't know why, I saw an advert for one of the books and I was like, I should give that another go. And it turned out I'd actually already read it and I'd just forgotten. So I went back and I reread, I think that one was Stolen Air, the one where she's a ballerina. And I reread that one and I really enjoyed it. And then I got hooked and I read the whole of the series. And this, for me, this is what a Mafia romance series should be doing. This is the kind of level I'm expecting. I want high stakes, I want high drama, I want good sexy times, I want uber alpha dominant men who completely turn to mush for their females, who sometimes appear weak but always end up to be pretty strong and always end up sort of controlling their husbands. I absolutely devoured this series in a matter of days. There is no contest, this is the best Mafia series I've read of this year, hands down, end of. Thank you very much. I feel we're kind of like in a dark environment, so let's keep it there and go with best dark romance. So I do love a dark romance. I read a lot of dark romance, and I also have different views on sort of what constitutes a dark romance to what doesn't. But here are the 4 that really were sort of like top of my list. So first we have Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. This is a stalker romance. It is incredibly dark. It features some incredibly dubious scenes, which, ooh, if you don't like that kind of thing, you're going to hate this book. It's also really freaking scary because there are moments of him creeping into her house, like when she doesn't know about it. There's a whole haunted house scene which still to this day traumatizes me. It is a scary, scary ass book. I know some people have said they didn't think it was that dark, and I really would love to know what they were reading because it was dark, yeah? H.G. Carlton also wrote Does It Hurt, which was another book that could easily feature on this list, but it was Haunting Adeline was definitely darker. This book would probably have been my top dark romance, if not for the fact that book 2, Hunting Adeline, I just didn't really like. I didn't like where it was going, and I ended up skim reading it because I couldn't be bothered to finish it. So yeah. Then we have There Are No Saints by Sophie Lark. I feel like I've spoken a lot about her. This is a dark romance duet, and again, probably would have won, but I did prefer book 1 to book 2. Book 2 didn't quite go where I wanted it to go. So this is a serial killer romance where our heroine is caught in this cat and mouse game between 2 serial killers, and she falls for one of them is trying to kill her, and it's all very dramatic and all very grim and all very dark. Then the next dark series that I read that I really, really enjoyed was Honey Trap by Tate James. This is like an assassin kind of series, and it also features 3 protagonists. We have a female and 2 male characters, and it is really hot, it's very steamy, it's very dramatic, there's lots of tension, there is lots of drama, there is lots of high stakes fights, and they're trying to be killed by this big guild of assassins. It's really exciting. It was such a fun read. I really enjoyed it, even with all the dark content, because that's the kind of twisted individual that I am. But yeah, this was definitely one of my favourites, and I really must go and read some other stuff from Tate James because I feel like I'm missing out here a bit. But my winner for Best Dark Romance is possibly the only fanfiction I have ever read. And I have Tiff to thank for this from Tiff Talks Pages. She was raving about this fanfiction way back at the beginning of the year. And this is Manacled. This is a Draco Malfoy, Hermione Granger dark romance. Handmaid's Tale meets Harry Potter. Just blew my freaking mind. I didn't know fanfiction could be this good. I didn't know it could be this gripping. I didn't know it could be this dark. I mean, it goes places. It's so good. If you haven't, I imagine everybody on the planet has read this book by now, but if you haven't, go and find it. Like, Google it, find it. It's incredible, and it's so flipping dark, but also so satisfying. The best thing about dark romance is when they somehow round it out at the end to make it satisfying. This one does that so well. Beautiful. Loved it. Thank you very much, Tiff. Oh, just wonderful. So, next up, Best Poly Romance. So this is any book that really features more than 2 love interests. First up we have Triple Duty Bodyguards by Lily Gold. Lily Gold has written a series of poly romances, all featuring 1 heroine and 3 heroes. 3 heroes, 1 heroine. And she's written a bunch of them. There was Swedish Mountain Men, there was Nanny for the Neighbours, there was something else, I can't remember. This was my favourite. It was a bodyguard romance, 3 bodyguards, 1 heroine who's an actress, a bit spoiled, bit of a diva, everybody thinks, and she has a stalker and she's protecting, and just, it was lovely. I loved it. Loved the fact that some of the heroes didn't like the actress and some of them did, and some of them took some convincing, and then also some of them had completely misjudged her and her character. It was beautiful. Then we have Lola and the Millionaires. 2022 was the first year I read an Omegaverse romance. I had never heard of that as a concept before this year. And yeah, the whole sort of primal wolf-like qualities, but not in a shifter setting. So having alphas and betas and omegas and all the stuff that goes with it was fascinating. This whole series by Catherine Ream was really intriguing and new to me. And it was really exciting because I think I'd never really read anything like it. Lola and the Millionaires is awesome, but also a little bit dark and does come with a fair few content warnings, so just go and check those out before you dig in. This is like a heroine who is used to being used by alphas, but she's never like fully taken on by a group of alphas. She's always just used and then tossed aside. And there are some quite dark scenes actually, because she's treated quite badly by a number of people, but then she eventually meets the group who she ends up with. It's really, really hard to explain how Omegaverses work without having read one, unless you literally spoil the whole thing, and I kind of don't want to do that. But there's a lot of poly stuff. There is often, but not always, some same-sex content. So in this one, some of the males are also sexual with the other males as well as with the females. It's all just a big happy hurrah of people all loving each other and enjoying each other, and it's just, it's fun. And then we have A Den of Vipers by K.A. Knight, I believe it was, and this was on the darker side than the other 2. Initially it's like a captor situation. Our heroine is taken captive by our group of heroes who are all like a mafia style group, and they take her on because I believe of some debt from her father, maybe, if I remember rightly. And yeah, initially you think she's going to be subjected to all sort of indignities and poor treatment, but actually they're all won over by her pretty quickly, and they actually get very protective of her, and she becomes one of their group. And what I really liked about this one is the dynamic between them, and she has a slightly different dynamic with each of the guys, which I think is always important. But as well as that, by the end of the series you feel like she is definitely one of them. It's not just that they are these mafia alpha males who run the place and she's just a little woman who sits by the wayside. She's part of their gang, and she is out there doing mafia stuff and getting vengeance on people, and I really, really enjoyed it. It was awesome. But the best poly romance I've read this year, hands down, no contest, not even a conversation to be had, was A Give Me More by Sarah Kate from the Salacious Players Club series. This series was just, what to say about this series? It was just amazing. It features the owners of a sex club who all have a different kink, and each kink is just sort of examined as we go through the books. It's a very popular series. Everybody's talking about it on every kind of media you can imagine. Everyone loves it, and everybody has a different favourite. This one was my favourite. I adored Give Me More. So you have Hunter and Isabel, who are a happily married couple, but Hunter wants to maybe dabble in a little bit of wife sharing, and so he asks his best friend Drake if he will sleep with his wife. There's no delicate way of saying it, that's what he does. And Drake is like, whoa, not a chance, mate. I don't fancy your wife. I'm not having sex with your wife. That will complicate matters. It will ruin our friendship. Blah, 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 blah. But that's what they end up doing. They're going on a tour of sex clubs to sort of do research. So the book features a lot of different scenes in different clubs. And so you get lots of different environments and lots of different apparatus. And it's just really, really good. But what makes this book so special is it is steamy. It is steamy. There is so much sex in this book. And there's so much interesting sex. And there's sex between Isabel and Hunter, and Isabel and Drake, and Isabel, Drake and Hunter, and Drake and Hunter. And that's what makes this book special, is the exploration of the relationship between Drake and Hunter's coming to terms with his bisexuality, and the fact that he's been raised to believe that this is a part of him that's wrong, but actually sort of owning his desires and owning his love for Drake. It was just beautifully written. It was so special, and I just absolutely loved it. I loved it so much. I've read the book twice. I've listened to the book on audio. The audio is amazing. 3 fantastic actors who read the book. It's just beautiful, and it is so well done, and it is steamy, but it's not just about the steam, and that's what I really like about it, and that's why this is my favourite poly book of this year. So, the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that my backdrop's changed, and so have I. And that is because, yes, of course, I ran out of time when I was last filming this particular video. So we have time travelled into the future, where I'm going to try now to finish off the 2022 Reading Awards video. So my next and second to last category in this video is going to be my best new to me author. So I have been blessed this year, and I have read a lot of new to me authors who I have really enjoyed, and I have now got a few of them that I've got a backlist a mile long to go and get caught up on. And these are just a few of the authors who I am most looking forward to reading more from in 2023. So first up we have Elsie Silver. Mentioned her earlier on. Everybody loved Elsie Silver this year. I have so far only read Heartless and Flawless. I haven't read any of her other books. I have got one of them downloaded on my Kindle. I found her writing style to be so easy. Her characters were so likeable. There was so much great banter. You know when you get a book and it reads itself, because it almost just flows into you organically, and you don't even have to really try. There's no concentration involved. It's just being absorbed into your brain in the most warm, fuzzy, wonderful way. That's how I felt reading Elsie Silver's books. I just felt comfortable, like I was sat with an old friend having a story told to me. It was just delightful, and I can't wait to see what else she has done. Next up we have Anna Huang. I read all of the Twisted series last year, and I also read King of Wrath, the first in her new series, and I'm very, very excited to continue that series and see how we're going to get on. Again, these were books that they had a little bit more bite to them than the Elsie Silver did. There was often a bit of suspense, often a bit of drama and a bit of threat. The heroes were a little bit on the darker side, a little bit twisted. I enjoy that. I don't think all of the Twisted books were maybe 5 stars, but they were all pretty damn close, and I did really, really enjoy them all. Some slightly more than others, but consistently found them all to be very enjoyable, fast-paced, exciting reads, which is basically what I'm in the mood for at the moment. Next up is another author that everybody's talking about at the moment, and this is Sarah Kate. Obviously, I read the Salacious Players Club series, but I also did read a few of her other books. Let me think. Burn for Me, I think, was one of them, which, taboo student teacher romance, not my favourite, but still arguably a good book, even if it wasn't quite for me. And then I read Gravity and Freefall, which are very on the dark side. Again, not probably as much for me as the Salacious Players Club were, but still very enjoyable, still exciting. I can still see why a lot of people like them. I am excited to see what happens next in the Salacious Players Club. I know there is a big age gap romance coming, which may be testing my realms of how much of an age gap I will accept, because I think it's like 25 years, which is big even for me, but I'm willing to give it a go. And then there is a new, apparently secret release coming that she hasn't told anybody about, so I can only be excited to wait and see what that is, because again, Sarah Kate, cracking author, great writing, so easy to read, beautiful characterizations. I've spoken about Give Me More already, but I will say it again, favourite book possibly of the whole year, just can't beat it. And the next author is one I haven't heard as many people talking about, and I think people need to catch up with this, because if you haven't read this author, you are missing out, especially if you're a fan of a bit of a slightly forbidden, angsty romance, because that is what she seems to specialise in, which is ironic because they are not particularly my favourite kind of book to read, and yet I have wolfed down as many of this author's books as I can find. This is Katharina Mora, who wrote the Off Limits series, and she's also writing this series here, which features The Wrong Bride. The Wrong Bride I spoke about, I think, in my October wrap-up, and said it was like the angstiest book I've read. It was so stressful for me to read. The hero enters into an arranged marriage with the heroine, even though he has previously been engaged to her sister, and it is messy and angsty, and there are a number of times I wanted to throw the bloody book out the window. But bizarrely, even with all that said, which is like my least favourite kind of reading experience, I loved this book and I couldn't put it down, and I was desperate to know how it ended. And I know this is only the first book in the series and there are more to come, and I cannot wait to find them out. The same author also wrote this fantasy book, which is like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which was also really, really enjoyable. So quite frankly, she's really impressed me this year. I'd never heard of her before. I don't see a lot of people speaking about her, and I think more people need to get on this train because I'm so impressed. But the winner of this category is also another author that I've spoken about already, and that is Morgan Elizabeth. Now, obviously, I've already mentioned that tis the season for revenge book, which is fantastic, but I also read The X-Files, which is a phenomenal book about a dating agency with a difference, which is well worth a read. Very steamy, very funny, great characterization, really, really enjoyed it. And the second one in that series, which was called Walking Red Flag, that's this one. Also, phenomenal book. Such a good book. This features a heroine that has ADHD, which I found fascinating, as you do not see that a lot in books, and I thought it was a really interesting representation of that sort of neurodivergence. And the hero is a doctor. They meet in embarrassing medical circumstances. I'll leave you to find out what they are. And again, I just absolutely loved it. The writing is so good. The characters are so lovable. The hero is just delicious. It's such a good series. I still have the third book in the series, Bittersweet, to read, and I'm so excited to do so because I absolutely loved this author this year. She's fantastic, and everything I've read by her has been a 5-star. Just cannot beat it. So finally we come to my final category for this video, and this is my most read author of 2022. Now, there were quite a few authors who I had read a fair number of books from, so I'm going to just list like very quickly the top 4 runners up. So first up we have Catherine Moon, who I read 7 books by this year. This was mainly due to me reading her entire Sweet Omegaverse series, plus I also read Lady of Rutsgrave Manor, so plenty of books by this author, and I hope plenty more to come. With 8 books, I read Callie Hart. Callie Hart is a long-term favourite author of mine. She writes books that are definitely on the darker side, very dramatic, sometimes a bit on the bully side of things, often features characters of like college age. I think all of the books I read from her this year were rereads. I had read them all before, but I was really in that kind of mood again, and I read the whole of the Crooked Sinners series, which is Riot Act, Riot House and Riot Rules, not necessarily in that order, can't remember the order. There was also the Rally Rebels series, which is like feels like a late high school college age, I think, if I remember rightly. Also very dark. Any of these books you probably want to check if they're trigger warnings because there are iffy points in all of them. And my favourite series by Callie Hart is without a doubt Dirty Nasty Freaks, which is a hitman book where the hitman meets the heroine in the first book when he's out on a mission. and they get involved, and it's just bliss. I just love it. I've reread this a number of times. It's one of my favourite series, and I did reread it again this year. Then with 11 books, we have Sophie Lark. I did read all of the Brutal Birthright series, the Kingmaker series, and also There Are No Saints, There Are No Devils, and I started Anastasia. So a lot of books by this author this year. Her Mafia book particularly are my favourite. Love it. With 15 books, we have Scarlett Scott, who is a historical author this year. I read a number of her series, The Sinful Suttons, The Unexpected Lords, and The Sins and Scoundrels. And I know I have so many books from that series that I didn't read, and I really need to get back into that mood and finish her off, because she was such a great historical author that, again, I don't see many people talk about, but I have noticed Christy from Christy Reads a Lot has been talking about her recently. So I'm glad someone else has cottoned on, because she's just a really entertaining, exciting historical romance author, and there's such a backlist to get through that I can't wait to get stuck back in. But the author that I read the most books this year, with a whopping 28 books, is another historical romance author, and this is Emma V. Leach. I find her books so very easy to read. The series I've read by her so far are the Rogues and Gentlemen series, which features a lot of smuggling, sort of like high intrigue, high drama kind of series. Then there's the Girls Who Dare series, which again features a group of young women who, the premise is that they all have to perform a dare to try and make their lives more interesting, and these dares are often kiss a gentleman at midnight, or dress up like a man, or go somewhere you're not supposed to go, or something along these lines. And it also always leads to some sort of romantic plot between the heroine and the hero. And then the Daring Daughters is the direct sequel to the Girls Who Dare series, where their children are then grown up and are now off and getting into scrapes all of their own. What I really like about these books are, technically, yes, they can be read in order, and probably should be read in order if you really want to enjoy them, but you could probably dip into any of these. They do have a lot of drama. Each book sort of satisfies a different trope. So there are marriage as convenience, there are friends to lovers, there are enemies to lovers, there are revenge plots. If you can think of a plot point and a trope, it's probably in one of these books somewhere. And all of the characters are different and exciting, but the whole thing feels very familiar and very comforting as I go through and read them all. And I just find them so easy to pick up and read. They're an instant one click. The second one pops up on my Kindle as a new one that's been released. I will download it and read it almost straight away. And it is really satisfying sometimes to see characters that you've been shipping, for want of a better word, for a number of books finally get it together and work it out. So Emma V. Leach, my most read author of 2022, and it would not surprise me if I read a lot of her books in 2023 as well. Whew! So there you have it. We have reached the end of the 2022 Reading Awards. The 2022 was a great year for me with reading. I definitely tried to steer away from reading because I felt I had to. I didn't take part in as many book clubs as I had in the year before. I didn't do as many read-alongs. I just read whatever the heck I felt like at that moment, and it worked really well for me. I think I am definitely a mood reader. I want to read for enjoyment, and I want to read for me, not for anybody else. And if that means that I have to just go off and do my own thing, then that's what I'm going to do. I do, however, still love talking to people about books that we've read. So if you have read any of these books or any of these authors and you want to chat to me about them, or if you haven't read any of them and you would like to have a bit more information, please do send me a message either here or on any of my social media, because I'm always desperate to chat to people about books. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been a blast sitting down and figuring out all of my favourite books from last year, and I'll be back soon with another video. See ya!